Hey folks, it's Sam and it's Monday, September 7th at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time, and I'm here talking about your crazy brain, the moon, your psychology, your brain, your karma, how your karma is in your brain, and all kinds of crazy things. I'm going to be going off a diagram here where I'm going to be talking about neuroscience and the three brains, your inner reptile, your inner mammal, and your inner human brain, how those things are shown in the astrology chart, what the astrology chart is. It's basically a portrait of the pattern in your brain and the sort of neuroscience behind the brain, and then how we take that karma, which your brain is made from karma, and project that into the world and create our life and wind up being either Miss Happy Face or Sad Face. Which one are we? Happy Face or Sad Face? And so I'm also going to be talking about this story of how the sky itself is the matrix. It's the divine being into which all of our karma comes in to our brain and our mind, and explaining the age of our solar system, how the sun and moon create life on Earth through the number 108. Again, how that sets up this matrix into which our karma comes into our brain, into our mind, and goes with us from lifetime to lifetime. And then we read that in the astrology chart as our karma. So all of these things relate to the moon. They all revolve around the moon as the manas, or what's called the jiva atman. So I'm going to be talking about that today quite a lot. And I just posted a link to this page here. I'm going to be going off this page that you can get. It's a special that I've been offering, where you can get uh, 10 hours of classes where I go into these things in great detail. It's a special that I've been doing. One is yoga, Ayurveda, and Vedic astrology, which is 6 hours of classes. I'm going to give an overview of that when I discuss the sacred number 108, the life, the timeline of life on Earth, how it forms our mind and gunas and brain. You also get a course called Quantum Vedic Astrology and Neuroscience, which I'm also going to talk about. That was, you see, this is the first one, the Yoga, Ayurveda, and Vedic Astrology, 6 hours of classes. I'm going to talk about that today. You also, this Quantum Vedic Astrology, 2 hours, where we talk about neuroscience and the three brains. And then in this bundle of courses, there's also one called Spiritual Vedic Astrology, where I talk about all of the nakshatras. It's a great way to get a lot of information about Vedic astrology, and for not a lot of money. It's not even $10, and it's greatly discounted, and it really is, because the people that came, for example, this was part of a 3-day workshop that I taught, and people that attended in real time paid more than $200. In fact, yeah, it was $297. So this is a legitimate value. Um, this is part of a course that is, about, it's like a $97 course, and you get a big portion of it here. So anyway, I'm going to be talking about, giving an overview of these principles, because these concepts are really powerful. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So I want to keep this screenshot up because it's such a, rich thing to understand. And if you don't understand these structures, then honestly, in some ways, you don't really know sort of what you're doing with astrology or with life, because these principles are based on what's called Sankya Philosophy, which is the philosophy of yoga, Ayurveda, and Vedic astrology. And that's why this first group of classes is on the Sankya philosophy, but it's even more accelerated because, as you can see in this little diagram here, I'm actually talking about life on Earth, the timeline and history of life on Earth, how long it's been here, other sacred vibrations. That's not even really part of Sankya philosophy, but just things that I've discovered and figured out and put together. So, again, like it says here, it says, do you know the sky itself is God? Now, maybe you believe that to be true, but do you know how it works? And literally, when I say this, the sky itself is God. That sounds like a pretty crazy idea, right? Because it's like, well, you know, the sky is God. First of all, God is a weird concept, but how is the sky God? Well, what else is there but the universe? Like, when you think about it, it's the most natural thing. What else is there except the universe? Everything that's happening is going to happen within that structure, right? You're in a universe, right? So it's easy to believe that, but if you don't know how it works, what good is a belief if it's not backed up by information and science? So in the 6-hour lecture, I break down the sacred timekeeping at the heart of Vedic astrology and all related sciences. You'll understand how billions of years of genius are folded into every cell of our body and directly referred to by the Indian sages. Within this context, it's clear to see how Vedic astrology is the study of karma and our infinite soul as it grapples with evolving consciousness. So the thing I'm saying here is that it's very easy to believe these things, and I believe it, but then have no idea how any of it works. How does it work? Well, again, it's very clearly laid out, um, based on the science that we already know. For example, in the first video there, I talk about a timeline of life on Earth. So what that means is that life on Earth has been here for 4.5 billion years. 4.5 billion years is a long time, obviously. And human beings or people have been here about 100 to 200,000 years. Now, again, they're all big numbers. It sounds like, well, it's a long time either way. 4.5 billion, 100,000, it's all a lot of money. I wish I had that much money, right? But they're very different numbers. If you were to take 4.5 billion and 100,000, it would look like this. Like if you were to take like 100 books like this book is about 400 pages. So if you were to take 100 books like this, that would actually represent 4 billion years. Like 100 books like this stacked one on top of another. That would be about 8 or 10 feet of books. If you were to break that out into 100,000, 100,000 of that 4 billion would be the last page in the stack of books. Last page. That's how long human beings have been here, if you want to look at the timeline. That's crazy. That's how long it took for all of these planets moving in their orbits to create mind and consciousness in the way that it's experienced now. The way that it's experienced now is, again, we have a very refined nervous system, a very refined level of consciousness, but it took 4.5 billion years for that to happen. And this sacred astronomy, which I talk about in the second video here, the sacred astronomy, and again, the first video I explain all that in great detail. The sacred astronomy behind all of this really indicates that the sacred number 108 is actually reflects this cosmic vibration between the orbits of the sun, moon, and earth. Now, again, we've all heard that the reason there's 108, we have 108 beads on the mala and all that. The main 108 ratio is the ratio between the sun, moon, and earth, and it's a ratio between the scale and the size of the planets, the sun and the moon, and the distance between us and them. So if you've ever noticed that the sun and the moon look exactly the same size to us on Earth, so much so that when you have a solar eclipse, the disk of the moon fits right inside the disk of the sun. Now, how crazy is that? Have you ever thought of that? It's just one of these everyday miracles that we just kind of look up. Oh yeah, yeah, look, the moon fit right inside the sun, huh? Crazy. And we go on. No, it's not. It's really crazy that this rock and this gigantic ball of fire, which have nothing to do with each other, they're just two objects. From where we're standing on Earth looking up, they're exactly the same size. So how do you think that? What do you think is going on there? Well, I'll tell you what's going on. It took 4.5 billion years, essentially, for those two objects to be perfectly aligned as they are now. You should know that the moon is slipping out of its orbit. It's it's it moves out of its orbit away from the Earth about, I think it's about an inch or centimeter every year or something like that. I don't remember the exact amount. But the moon actually was part of the Earth. It broke off from the Earth and formed, coagulated, and then started orbiting the Earth. Or some say it's even older than the sun, which I'm not sure that's true. I don't remember the exact science behind that. But the sun, moon, and Earth have been doing this dance for billions of years. And it took billions of years for the sun, moon, and Earth to work into this sacred vibration. And now, and within the last couple 100,000 years, the sun, moon, and Earth have been in that sacred vibration of 108. The reason this is important is because when we look at the age of humans, which is what we're living in now, we have to realize that that most refined part of consciousness, which is what it means to be a human, comes from the moon. That's what the moon is. Before that, before we worked into that sacred vibrational frequency, there were all the other animals, all the other mammals, and flowers and reptiles and all the other life, but there wasn't that consciousness that had flowered as it has in humanity. And even though in our in my more, misanthropic moments, misanthropy means that you hate people, that you hate humanity. Even in my most misanthropic moments, I can think that human beings aren't the most evolved, that we're not the most kind, we're certainly not the most loving. Underneath it all, we do have the most capacity because we have the capacity for reflective consciousness. And that reflective consciousness is the moon. And so the sun, moon, and earth moving into this sacred vibration is really what we are celebrating when we say our mantras. 108, that sacred vibration is that point of equilibrium that we're living in now. And if you know yogic practices, you say the mantra twice. What you're supposed to do is you say 108 mantras once, then you flip the mala over and you say 108 twice. You're supposed to say it twice. One side, and then you flip it over, because when you're moving the mala beads, you're touching one side of the mala beads, then you flip them over and you do it again to touch the other side. And again, this is a way to balance the sun and the moon. And so again, if you don't understand these things and you're just saying, by the way, that's the same number of beads on a rosary bead in Christianity. The number 108 is a universal number. And this is why. Again, we can say a lot of other ones, especially in astrology. There's 4 directions times 27 nakshatras, 9 planets times 12 signs. All of that is secondary, because the primary thing is we need to have a relationship between the sun, moon, and earth so that our brain can even understand any of this. Because it's that sacred vibration between sun, moon, and earth that gave us a brain to even understand it. And that brain, to understand it, and that consciousness, it comes from the moon. It waited until the moon moved into that sacred vibration, and then after that, the humanoids or whatever began developing sciences and looking around in their environment and started to evolve in their mind. And so from that point of view, spirit takes form as body, mind, and spirit through the three gunas. We have the body, and the body is related to the earth. We have the mind, or the manas, which is related to the moon. And we have spirit, which is related to the sun. And these things are also correlate with what are called the three gunas of tamas, rajas, and sattva. And they also filter down into things like tamas, which is related to the body, is also related to our individuality and trying to preserve the body and trying to live and survive. That's a tamasic instinct. That instinctive animal is tamasic. Now, again, in yoga, tamas is, said to be darkness and ignorance, but as a universal principle of life, it also has its own strength, and it's not just a judgment. But the tamas is related to ourself, our individuality, and our body, and wanting to survive. It's also what's related to the reptile brain, which I'm going to talk about down here in neuroscience as part of the triune brain. But then we also have rajas, which is about activity, passion, desire. That's related to the mind and the moon in the body, mind, spirit, and the emotions. And it's also related to others. Rajas is related to others and the moon. And it's also related to what's called the mammal brain or the limbic brain, whereas the tamas is our self, our preservation, and the reptile brain that just wants to survive. The rajas is the mind, that mammal brain, and it's more related to others. Just like you see mammals, they live in a pack or in a herd or in some kind of group. For example, reptiles don't. Now, it doesn't mean they don't care for their young and whatnot, but at some point they they sort of give birth to them through eggs and stuff, and then they're sort of on their own a little bit. They try to protect them, but it's not like mammals who live in a society. And then the sattvic brain is related to the sun, and it's about spirit. It's about the universal concerns, especially universal in the sense of it's not just about me and my survival or me and all the other people in my life, because that's still about this world and trying to survive and be related to others. It's about transcendence, universality, transcending time and the earth and reuniting with that oneness, which is the sattvic principle. And it's related to the human brain of looking beyond just the limbic system and the emotions and our comfort zone with all the people around us. Again, chimpanzees and dogs and antelopes, they have that mammal brain like we do, but they don't have the brain that says, but what's it all mean? But who am I? But what's the point of all this? Why am I here? At least we don't think they do, and they probably don't. That's what the human brain is. That's what the human has evolved to be able to do. Self-reflection, to ponder meaning, to create meaning and purpose. And so those three gunas filter down and form our brain on that level, on that sort of on those three instinctive levels. And the most impactful part of our brain is the tamasic brain, is the reptile brain, because first we want to survive. The next is the mammal brain. After survival, then we want to enjoy life, Again, the Rajasic mammal brain is also about enjoying life with our friends and family. Most of us hang out right there, and our whole life is spent just trying to enjoy life, maybe with our kids and our family and the people around us. And then somewhere in that sort of miasma of trying to enjoy our life, there's some, well, what does it all mean? What's the point of it all? It usually comes through some loss and some suffering. Then we get thrust into a deeper meaning of, well, what's the point of all this? So those three principles are important. And of course, in this context, I talk about them just as general indicators, like I'm doing now. Because first we need to understand the principles and the motivations. But again, even down here, like you see, I talk about each one of those gunas, especially when we get into the neuroscience of the three brains, actually rule one of those parts of our brain. There are a couple planets that rule those parts of our brain. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But first, as a general principle, we need to understand these are the motivations in life. And this is how we evolve. And in this video, in this one on the divine planets, what I do is I go through every planet. And that every planet as an evolutionary principle. Because this matrix of body, mind, spirit, or tamas, rajas, sattva, or self, others, universal, this is how everything evolves. This is how we evolve. All the planets then evolve through body, mind, and spirit, through the three gunas. This is why you should know these universal principles, because whether you know it or not, this is how your whole life is unfolding. This is how your karma is unfolding. This is how every energy in you is evolving. Things don't just evolve somehow. I don't know, it's just kind of evolving somehow. Something's happening somehow. That's not true. That shows you don't know. It doesn't mean you can't. In fact, you can know very easily. This is why you study these sciences. Because the planetary forces are the forces of life. They're the energies, the specific energies. It's not just energy somehow. No, they're specific energies. Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, and the nodes. Those are the energies that everything is, that's what's going on. And they're all evolving through body, mind, spirit. The sun through body, mind, spirit. Tamas, Rajas, Sattva. The moon through body, mind, spirit. Mars, body, mind, spirit. And so in the video that I have here on divine planets, what I do is then explain each planet as it evolves through body, mind, spirit. If you could see even on the graphic here that I have on this screenshot, it says sun, and then it's like the tamasic nature of the sun, energy in you, in its tamasic darkest form is like a tyrant. I'm the one who's powerful. I demand respect. If you don't, I can dismiss you. And it's like a tyrant, like a dictator. That's on the tamasic level, of the ignorant level where we're just trying to survive. And then the sort of emotional level with the sun has to do with things like, power struggles, like normal power struggles we have. Someone insults you and it's like, oh, and the sun rises up, I'm strong, right? And we get into, that's like the Rajasic nature. You want to understand that the Rajasic, or the relationship with other people, is how most of us experience life energies. It's very average in this Rajasic emotional way. We're very Rajasic in life, which means we're very emotional. And the emotions are Rajasic. Again, the body is tamasic, the emotions are Rajasic, and the heart, those higher virtues, are sattvic. Again, body, mind, spirit. Mind is really like emotion. Spirit is, again, things that are more pure. But most of the way we experience life and the planets themselves are emotional. Through the emotions, the planets have a feeling. And by the way, all of the indications from the rishis, from the astrology sages, when they give indications like, cruel or gentle or, malefic and all, That's really all they're indicating. They're really talking about how it feels because we're very emotional. It's not a judgment about good or bad because they're all good. Or they all could be bad if you want to look at it that way. They're all on this evolutionary process through body, mind, spirit. They're all evolutionary forces. So again, the sun goes from being like a tyrant when we use it through a lot of ignorance to just getting into normal power struggles through the Rajasic normal expression to then as a spiritual force, as a spiritualizing force, the sun gives great vision and capacity to sacrifice and seeing true power beyond this separate body, beyond this individuality, for example. So each of the planets have that capacity, and not just capacity, but challenge. This is what you're doing in your life, whether you know it or not. And it's better that you know it. Like I said, it's good to believe all this stuff, but do you really know how it works? Do you want to know? Because you can learn it. Again, this group of classes, I go through this like 6 hours explaining this. Again, it's only $9.47. But you could hear me talk about this for 6 hours. And again, you should know this. Again, whether you get it or not, and I get the $9.50, you know, but you should know this. You should understand this. It's happening whether you know it or not. And again, especially in the sense of how these, for example, like Venus. Venus is a big one. Venus through the physical body, through the tamas, is about pleasure. It's about literally like physical pleasure. Like for example, I can experience Venus all by myself. I can experience Venus by like eating ice cream or candy or something. I don't need anybody for it. I can just enjoy, and again, we might call that enjoying life, but it's just getting some pleasure through the physical body. But again, it's very limited because too much physical pleasure and it depletes the body because the body is not just a vehicle for pleasure. Again, we often don't know this. We think our body is just a vehicle for pleasure. And again, that's very unspiritual because our body is not just for pleasure. We can experience pleasure, but that's not the point of the body, not in a spiritual sense. The body is a vehicle for liberation. That's what a yogi sees the body as, not as something that experiences pleasure. So Venus through the body, first, is something where we can enjoy pleasure for ourselves. Then a more refined version of Venus is where we can share pleasure and give happiness to another person. And it's shared, where it's not just about my pleasure, but it's about your pleasure and your happiness as well. Now, of course, you can see why Venus is related to sex in this way, because in sex, it's not just my pleasure and happiness, it's yours as well, hopefully, which, again, that's what we're involved in. And we want to share and give pleasure as much as we want to experience it. And what happens, because it's a more refined type of pleasure, it winds up not just giving pleasure, but giving happiness. Happiness is a higher vibration of Venus. Because, again, you could say, if you're not thinking with a lot of refinement, you could say that eating ice cream or something gives you happiness. That's not really happiness. That's pleasure. Happiness is something that makes you happy, like in your life, is like with other people or something like that. Pleasure, you eat the ice cream, then it's done. It's not like you're happy. In fact, many times it makes you sad afterward because it could deplete your energy, like I said. So pleasure is Venus through the physical body. Happiness is Venus on the emotional level. And it's usually related to other people or some other kind of thing where it's not just about our pleasure, but it's about sharing it. Again, this is Venus, the evolutionary principle of Venus through the three gunas, body, mind, and then spirit. If you take it beyond even happiness, you're like, well, what's beyond happiness? Well, what's beyond, happiness is often something where there's a condition. If I do this, I'm happy. Or if you do this, I'm happy. If you don't do this, I'm not happy. So again, as we're refining pleasure into happiness, now we have another issue, because if now it's about other people, then I want to share happiness with other people, but Jesus Christ, now you're really complicating things, because people, I mean, they don't make you happy. Now I'm more unhappy than when I started, and I'm just going to go eat some ice cream and get a little pleasure. Just trying to derive my happiness is very hard to come by. At least I can get pleasure on my own, but if I got to get happiness and with other people, again, isn't this where we get hung up? The reason is because happiness is an emotional thing, it's rajasic, and it's often conditioned with other people. So the next level beyond that is bliss or joy, which doesn't have a source externally. It's not an external source, it's an internal source where you're the source of it yourself. It's not some kind of food or some kind of pleasure for the body. It's not some other person, which is more refined and more elevated, but also harder to manage. No, instead of coming from the outside, it's from the inside. And you find that you're just happy for no reason, because your true nature is bliss. Because your true nature is bliss. And the highest nature of Venus is to connect with that bliss and happiness without a source, with no reason for it. Again, I'm talking about all these things because these all live in the mind. And this all of these things are part of the field of consciousness that we experience emotionally, and especially the as we experience our karma, because karma lives in the mind, in what's called manas, which is the moon. And the nature of the mind and the nature of manas is it actually is the part of our nature, whereas the sun is that universal self without a second. It's just that oneness that we all share, which means that the one in me is the one in you. There's only one of them. The moon is where there's duality introduced, where it's not just where that oneness becomes differentiated. And in Sankya philosophy, it's where the oneness of Shiva becomes the Shiva Shakti, Purusha Prakriti, Paramatman or Supreme Self, and Jiva Atman. And it becomes a separate being. And that separate being is formed based on karma. And that karma descends into the mind. And that mind is read, and that karma that forms the mind forms like our psychology. This is why the moon is the most important planet of our psychology. When you're looking at the moon, you're really looking at the person's what we now call psychology, which is basically just how it feels to be alive, how it feels to be you. Because when you think about it, there's something that, even though you've gone through all these different twists and turns in your life, you have, something about it feels like it's the same person. I mean, think about it. Think about your earliest memories. Now, again, they're a long time ago, but something about everything that goes on in your life feels like it's you experiencing it. And it's a feeling. It's what it feels like to be alive, what it feels like to be you, and how primal that is. All your memories kind of filter through that. Everything has some kind of consistent through line that feels like it's been you the whole time. Even though you can go back and like look at your body and look at the things you did, and it seems like another world, part of you, it's like, no, that was me. I was somewhere, that was part of what was going on. And you can conjure up the feeling like, and you can remember how it felt at that time. This is the moon, this connection to your feelings beyond the emotions of the moment, and this kind of through line, this sort of continuum, not just from this life, but all your past lives. See, that's what the Jiva Atman is. Jiva is the separate self that is that continuum, again, because even the things that you remember from earlier in this lifetime, well, that's karma also. Karma is not just past lives. Karma is literally the decision you made 10 minutes ago or 15 minutes ago to come listen to me talk. That was a decision. And you're getting that karma right now. Hope you're enjoying it. But you took those actions and now you're getting this result. And so again, karma is throughout every moment of our life. But again, so when you think about the moon as the container of karma, you want to see it that way. And it's that complex and yet that simple. And when we get into past lives and all that stuff, again, you just want to extend the same model of this lifetime and just extend it beyond birth that you can remember. Again, think about it like this. Because we don't remember our past lives doesn't mean they didn't happen. Think of all the things that happened in this lifetime that you don't remember. And I'm not talking about just because of memories, but I mean big things like there was a time when you couldn't talk, you couldn't walk, but yet you don't remember it consciously. It's in there, but you don't remember it because we don't remember every single thing. Because what we're here to do is to try to evolve. And our mind and manas and brain and consciousness and psychology and all that is filtering through the most important things at any given moment in time. And then it goes back into the past to pull out other things, other memories, and whatnot. So it's a very subtle inner instrument called ahankara. That's one of the ways to recognize one of the components of the manas is ahamkara, which is the I maker. Others is the chitta. Again, without having a lesson totally on Sankya philosophy, all of that is related to the moon in Vedic astrology, though. And our karma sets in our moon and in our mind, the karma from the past lives, from the actions we take in this lifetime, and that forms our psychology. And the astrological chart, the astrology chart, like you would see here, let me make this bigger, like this is like an astrology chart, is literally like a portrait of your karma when you were born. Again, all the karma that led up to that moment, which means all the actions you had taken, your past actions, have formed your brain in a certain way, arranged your brain so that you have these tendencies. And in this lifetime, you're going to have those tendencies. You're going to live those tendencies. And again, this is the part also, like I said before, that even though you've been through all these things in your life, in many ways, you kind of react the same way. Like, again, a better version of it, hopefully. But this is why, again, when people start to learn astrology or start to ask questions about it, and they at times kind of forget that they've been alive or something. People go, well, but you could still change your karma, right? But you could still do this, right? And it's not a hard thing to understand. Your mind is the way it is, but you are always being challenged to act in accordance with the highest possibility, always. And you get opportunity after opportunity for your whole life. So astrology is just showing the life you've already been living. And of course, but within that range, as I'm describing now, something about it always feels like, yeah, here I am again, trying to not get aggravated over this thing, or here I am again, gravitating toward this thing again that I love. And it keeps coming up because that's your nature. Your pattern is to gravitate towards certain things, be attracted to some things, have aversions to others, and have it kind of feel a certain way within a range of potential that's shown in the birth chart. That's what the astrology chart is it's showing what is that arrangement of energy that formed your mind and your brain, and how are you likely to respond? What are you likely to be interested in or not interested in or whatever? And so this is why many astrologers like myself, I tend to favor, and I tend to only at this point, because I just find it's more I find it simpler to just read the Vimshotri dasha, which is a nakshatra based dasha. When you're reading the nakshatra based dashas, the nakshatra based dashas, especially Vimshotri dasha, is derived from the moon. It's a lunar dasha, which means you're reading the karmas as they come into the mind. And so when someone goes into a dasha cycle and the transits move in the sky, what's happening is karma it gets activated in the mind. And then the outer circumstances follow. Again, the karma is in the mind based on the past actions. It's not determinative of the actions you're definitely going to take. Now, again, an astrologer can predict what the likely actions are that you're going to take at any given time, but you can predict that too. You can wonder. It's our actions are not that, there's not that many possibilities. We're going to do this or we're going to do that. So again, so much focus is put on making the prediction when the predictions are usually the least important part of what astrology can give you. Fortune telling is like the least important part of astrology. What is important is being able to explain and understand the karma that the person, again, that's also a prediction, by the way, because when I do readings, I don't know the person. I don't know anything about them. But I could sit there and look at their chart and know it's basically like mind reading. I know what's in their mind and I know what they're grappling with at any given moment. If it's that important that I can predict which thing they might do or whatever, whatever. And I'm pretty good at it. But again, it's not the point. The point is that people understand that karmic choice. And so what happens is we have that overall pattern of energy that we experience as this mental, emotional, like psychology or whatever, based on the karma. We have a certain feeling environment, but then different parts of it arise at different times. When we go into, Saturn dasha or something, that part of it now is going to wake up. And again, like you see, this, like for example, when we talk about these three brains that I have here, the Saturn dasha is going to fire up the reptile brain. The nature is survival first, fear, control. Now, again, that's not necessarily a bad thing because we have to be careful judging, because when that's like a motivator on the reptile level with Saturn is fear and then control. But as we get to know ourselves, fear becomes a great, what are we afraid of? We have to work through our fears. It doesn't mean we're necessarily triggered by it or we're going to be, fearfully controlling others and fearfully controlling blah, blah, all of that. That's the negative quality. The positive quality is we work through our fears. We work through our fear of death. We have to face it because we're all afraid. But we're afraid of things that aren't really scary. We're afraid of the scary monster under the bed, but we've always been afraid of the scary monster under the bed. That's what I mean about our mind. It's always been kind of the same way. And it's not until we face it that we can work through it. So the karma of all the planets is just that part of our mind now comes alive and we have to contend with it. And within the pattern of energy that we already have. And so again, that's what a good astrologer learns how to do, is which part of our karma, which part of our brain, which part of our what are called samskaras in the yogic sense, which are all of the karmic habits of the past. What they're called in yoga is samskaras, which means all those past life actions that have formed your brain in this lifetime, those tendencies you have. That's what the astrology chart is showing. It's a picture of your samskaras, of that arrangement of energy. And when the dasha cycles run, again, Vimshotri dasha or nakshatra based dashas, with what I'm talking about, because they show the moon, then it shows what some scars or karmas are arising in the mind at that time. And that's going to trigger and fire off one of the brains. Again, when you look at from a neuroscientific level, again, neuroscience has these three brains. It's called the triune brain. There's the reptile brain, which is about survival. And it's, again, this is the tamasic nature. Then there's the mammal brain, which is about communion, like I already explained. And then the human brain, which is about evolution. So the two tamasic planets, visible planets, Mars and Saturn, show this like, it's really like fight or flight. Mars is fight, Saturn is flight. So fear and control, anger, discipline, this is like that reptilian brain. And those two planets they kind of fire that part of the brain when their energy comes. We're trying to, navigate difficulty and face, adversaries and whatnot, trying to survive. Mammal brain is Venus and Mercury. Venus has to do with happiness, like the mammals, and Mercury is about details, and especially things like speech, communication. One of the first things you start to see the difference between the mammals and the reptiles is the way they communicate. And a lot of the communication has to do with things like grooming and even sex and other things that they do to maintain a bond. And again, that allows them, they're more successful hunter gatherers and all that stuff. So it's an evolution from the reptile brain. And again, even within mammals, they have a reptile brain. So the brains go down. Monkeys also have a reptile brain. Tigers have a reptile brain. They don't have a human brain, no. But we have all three. And again, even within the mammal communities, their first instinct is reptilian. First thing is we're trying to survive. If we're surviving, then we can be happy with each other. But the first thing is if there's a threat, they all try to survive. But then we have the human brain, which is the sattvic brain, which has to do with evolution, which is the sun, which is the power of self, and the moon, the power of love, and Jupiter, which is meaning and purpose. And again, what we wind up doing, this diagram down here is really interesting. And I actually made this as part of a presentation that I did at I did this presentation. It was actually called, what was it called? I forgot. Karma and something. What was it? Quantum karma. Yeah, quantum level karma. And I did this presentation at a conference called the Science and Non-Duality Conference. And even people like Deepak Chopra and a few other well-known neuroscientists came by and saw my presentation and really liked it. But anyway, what it was doing was taking the astrology chart and showing how the astrology chart forms our brain, like I just said, and then how we take that brain and neuroscientific awareness and project that out into the universe to create our reality. In this course here, this quantum Vedic astrology, I actually give you a really good lesson on quantum physics. If you don't understand quantum physics, especially like the basics of quantum physics, like how everything is just energy, and every moment is an energetic possibility. It's a wave. And our attention collapses the wave into the particle and makes it become something rather than the endless possibility that existed before we chose something, before we chose it. Before we chose it, which is again based on our karma and how we see it, there was infinite possibility within the context of what we're doing. It's not an infinite possibility that I'm going to go play, for the Los Angeles Lakers in the NBA. I'm in my 50s and I'm 5'10". So that's not part of the infinite possibility. But within whatever moment you're at, you can choose anything within that context. But we keep choosing the same thing almost constantly over and over again based on this pattern. That's literally how karma works. Whoops. That's literally how karma works on the quantum level. It's not just somehow happening. Somehow it all happens. Again, if you think that, that's okay. That's what most people think. But if you want to actually understand how it works, it's not just somehow happening. Actually, it's not. Somehow it happens. We actually know how it happens now, particularly if you bring things like Sankya philosophy and these things I'm describing and astrology into the specifics of your brain and how your brain is wired and how it's wired around these evolutionary principles like reptile, mammal, human, and this all these cognitive biases we have and this way we see the world based on our karma and our samskaras. And then we project that out into the world and keep creating the same situation over and over again because of how we see it. Not because of the way it is, but because of how we see it. You know, people are just so stuck in their programming. Well, that's what the programming is. And you can see the programming in the chart. You know, I'm constantly talking to people who everybody wants to aspire to do something else. And then I start talking to them and then it's like, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but. It's like, this is why nothing happens because you're programming. You're programmed to think it's because, well, I'm a this person or I'm that or this happened to me or this whatever. That's just collapsing the infinite possibility of the quantum moment into exactly the same thing you keep expecting over and over again based on your patterning. So this on a quantum level and on the level of how neuroscience or the brain keeps creating our experiences on the energetic quantum level, it's very clear how this happens. And understanding quantum physics means that you understand the principles behind this. And by the way, nobody really understands quantum physics, including quantum physicists. So, but understanding the principles of how it works and why it works and what it is really fascinating. A thing called the double slit experiment. There's a thing called quantum entanglement, the casino effect, spooky action. All of this stuff is really important. And in this course here, I talk about this quantum Vedic astrology, which is the astrology chart passed through this neuroscience, this neuroscientific model, and then how we take that brain. There's a thing called the RAS, the reticular activating system, which keeps in our brain, we keep looking for what we're looking for. We keep doing it. We keep looking for affirmation. We seek affirmation, and we have what's called change blindness. Like we don't recognize when things have changed because we keep looking for the same thing over and over again. So I talk a lot about the cognitive biases that we have in our brain that keeps us stuck, and then how we stay stuck in this mindset, and then we project that out on the quantum level to keep creating the world that we keep expecting. And then we're like, see, there it is. See, I told you. See, this confirmation bias. We keep taking our mind, looking for what we're looking for. Then we find it. Then we project onto it and say, see, it wouldn't work either. See, that's not going to work either. See, I told you, it's just a big conspiracy. Again, this is why people are just so stuck. Why we keep doing the same thing over and over again. We keep looking for the conspiracy because we were lied to as a kid, or we found out that people weren't on it, whatever it is. We keep looking for it, we keep doing it, and we keep staying stuck where we are, or whatever it is. Not like that's a good example, but something like that. Or we keep, maybe it's the other thing. We keep looking for the hopeful thing, getting disappointed, keep doing it again because that's our patterning. So again, what astrology really teaches beyond this, beyond these principles that I'm talking about, is what the higher purposes are behind each of the planets, signs, houses, and all like that, and how we're evolving beyond those triggers and those instincts, because we're mostly just instinctive about the whole thing. We're not bringing a lot of consciousness into it. And again, I just posted the link if you're interested in getting this. Again, this is a great group of classes. Again, 10 hours of classes, about $10. And I call it the integral astrology. Again, day one shows you what I just talked about. This is actually the screenshot. This is the first course. All this stuff, again, this is 6 hours of this. Then it's 2 hours of the Quantum Vedic Astrology lecture where I go through all of these things in great detail. I talk about all of Indian principles of Dharma, karma. I talk about, again, this thing called change blindness and the RAS, the reticular activating system, how the brain really works, not just on the triune brain, but also how that then becomes these deeply embedded habits and patterns, and how that works on a very deep level, and how we then project that out into the world on the quantum level to create either the happy or the sad, how we're sort of doing it. And then there's another course also on spiritual Vedic astrology where I talk about the nakshatras and talk about the deities and whatnot. So again, it's only $9.47. When you go there and you click, it just goes to a checkout page, and you just kind of sign up for it. But I wanted to talk about this today because a lot of people have been asking me about these classes again, since I've been talking about them a little bit, and I wanted to talk about it because of the relationship of the moon and our karma, and how important it is to understand how your brain works and how karma works, because it's always a subject with people. It's one of the most misunderstood things that there is, really, is karma. And it says here, do you know that the signs of Vedic astrology directly relates to the science of the brain? That this should say science of the brain, neuroscience, and the science of matter, quantum physics. You may have heard these things referred to before, but how they work specifically is not known or understood until now. So again, I've heard many times, it's a bad typo here, which I got to fix, but I've heard, even when I was coming up and starting to learn, you always hear things like, "Oh yeah, quantum physics. That's just what the ancient Indians were talking about. They were saying the same thing. The Indians were saying the same thing." And I was always like, "All right, how? Like, what? How is it the same?" I mean, again, it's kind of lazy, sort of, because I never heard it talked about specifically. It's easy to say, "Oh, well, they were saying everything is energy, and that's what quantum physics thinks. Everything's energy." Okay, well, that's sort of okay. It's not the best explanation for it, though. And so what I do in these classes, especially in this quantum Vedic astrology, is I actually show it much more specifically. So it's not just, oh yeah, they were saying it's energy and quantum physics says it's energy too. I show you how it works. Like, what is the energy? It's energy, but how is the energy changing? And by the way, how is Vedic astrology or Vedic teachings saying that? And so, again, one of the things to understand is that consciousness itself is that unified field where all possibilities exist. And we fill that unified field of consciousness with our karmic projection. And that's shown by the chart. That's what the chart is. The chart is literally our ego and our separateness imposing itself upon the infinite possibility that exists. Okay? So I'm going to leave it there. I want to keep this under an hour, and we're close to being done. So I see there's been some questions here, but maybe I'll visit some of them online. But I'm going to leave it there. And again, check it out. By the way, if you do spend the $9.47 and you don't think it's worth it, I would give you your money back too, and all like that. Never had anyone ask for that, but I would do that, of course. But anyway, aside from buying that, I hope this was helpful for you to hear how the mind works, how the moon is the storage, the storehouse of our karma, and maybe some ways to understand your psychology and your karma on a deeper